with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Phronesis podcast. Thank you so much for checking in wherever you are in the world. Today, I have Zuzana Čmelíková, and she has been engaged in teaching and coaching for more than 20 years, especially in the areas of diagnosis and creation of organizational culture, leadership development, self-management, resilience, stress management, time management, managerial training, and soft skills training. Zuzana has completed the third degree of the university studies in the field of human management at Mate Bell University. She successfully completed professional internships abroad in Belgium and in the USA. In 2019, she became an internationally certified persolog coach for increasing personal performance, organizational performance, and streamlining communication and teamwork. In 2020, she received certification at the University of Pennsylvania in a specialization of positive psychology and resilience, directly from the creators of this concept. In 2024, she won the Category Lecturer of the Year in Learning and Development Awards. She is a leadership and resilience professional in Slovakia. So listeners, today, this is a first, Phronesis in Slovakia. Zuzana, thank you so much for being with me today. And what I always like to ask is, what's not on your bio? What else should people know about you?
Thank you very much for having me. I want to say hi to all our guests, all our listeners, and what else to say. Thank you very much for a beautiful introduction. And what's the most important information probably about me, what I consider the most important, that I'm mom of two wonderful children. I have a son, Yannick. He is 11 years old, and my daughter, Emma, is 9 years old. They are really great teachers.
I love that phrasing. They are great teachers. Yes. I've been in a 365-day-a-year, multi-year learning experience. It's an in-home program.
Yeah, very effective.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I think as we were planning this conversation, I know that you have hosted just incredible conferences. Cynthia Cherry from the ILA spoke so highly of your work. And I think where we're going to take the conversation today is just really some themes and some observations about leadership development in the Slovak Republic. You're going to give us a little bit of a lay of the land, and I'm excited to see where the conversation goes. So what are you seeing in the Slovak Republic when it comes to leadership development?
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is really interesting question. It's nice to have some kind of historical background when we talk about Slovak Republic and about leadership development in this part of the world. I would like to say that Slovakia is a really beautiful country that is situated just in the heart of Europe. Some or many people are being confused with Czech Republic or Slovak Republic. So we used to be Czechoslovakia, but from 1993, this Czech and Slovak Republic split in a very peaceful way. So we are very grateful for this. Since this period, a new era of Slovak Republic as an independent country was created. Of course, we were under communist regime from 1968 until 1989. So there were so many habits that were rooted deeply in people's mind. And of course, these people were influenced by a certain way of living. And when this shift of values in society happened, and when this new independent country was created, the Slovak Republic, it was not just like that to change thinking of the people. People were doing from the scratch. They were trying to find a new way how to create a independent country, how to start with a free market economy. And at the very beginning, it sometimes looked like a cowboy capitalism.
Wow.
That there were some people that took advantage of some state-owned companies, and they bought it for almost nothing, and they were not doing very good business with companies, and they brought it to bankruptcy. So there was a lot of room for corruption. And this was a huge problem for many countries, post-communist countries, to fight against corruption. And of course, it is not easy to change thinking of people. I'm talking again about habits of thinking, because the way how we think creates our reality. Also, Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology, said that it's all about how we interpret the reality in which we live. And also Aristotle, thousands of years ago, said that we become what we repeatedly do. And this is something what's really important to realize also in such societies as we are, quite young democracy. And we need to learn that we need to be really aware of what are our values. What do we stand for? Why is it important to realize that the term values is not automatically positive term, that it is neutral term? And when we talk about leadership, many people think that all people who have power are leaders, but it's not like that. And when we talk about that this term values is neutral, we can use as an example also some mafia groups that have their own values, and they are killing another people, and they are pursuing their own interests, and they are misusing them, and they are not living in the freedom. We can call them rather tyrants than leaders. And when we call people, or when we talk about leadership, it should be about people who help somebody else to grow, to learn something. And this is something what we are still learning here. We are in the process of transformation. It's not easy, but I believe that there are so many good role models also here in our society. We used to have amazing lady president, woman president, and she is already not in this position anymore. And it's also the consequence why this lady, Zuzana Čmelíková, made her decision to stop and not to be interested in continuity. To be in this position was that she felt fear. And this is something what is present in contemporary society. We can feel it everywhere, that contemporary leaders, not at all leaders, but state representatives use it. And they are offering very simple solutions and some shortcuts to people. And of course, shortcuts don't work. And some people think that it's much easier to believe this kind of promises. And I would call it some kind of transaction, that these people promised something to people, they believed, but they are not giving it back, they are not receiving it. So that's why I'm saying that we are in the process of learning as a society. Of course, it's a very important lesson to be learned. And I believe that we will be smart enough to learn from the history, and we will not let history to repeat, because we are geographically in a very interesting region. We are in the heart of Europe. We are neighboring countries with Ukraine in the east and Czech Republic in the west. So we are just in the middle of all these geographical interests. That's why I believe that leadership is really a hot topic that should be really discussed with much seriousity and with much attention. So let's go back to these values. So I believe that, or I agree with James McGregor Burns, who once said that leadership is one of the most discussed, but the least understood phenomenon. And we are here to learn and to be part of this change. So I consider it as my mission. I had several times opportunity to leave Slovakia, but the reason why I do what I do here in this region is that I believe that we need to educate people about the importance of critical thinking, that it's important to know, especially in this era, that not everything what is on the internet is valid information, that we need to learn how to validate those information and how to make decisions based on relevant facts. How is it important to know about the importance of vision and to learn that development should be rooted on the basis of moral values, not just like any kind of values, but on the basis of moral values, so that it will help us to become better people, to make better decisions. And also considering that stakeholder management, that when we talk about leadership and leaders, the followers are all stakeholders. So we need to be aware of who our stakeholders are and do the best kind of decisions that will be beneficial for these relationships, because this is so important.
Okay, so this is incredible. We have a country that is young. It's a young democracy. It's in transition. I'm imagining maybe your parents or that generation, even how they construct leadership has to be very fascinating, and how they think about what is leadership. So there's this transition and a shift in mindset and a way of thinking about leadership.
Right.
And of course, in that transition, it can be ripe at times for corruption or bad actors. But are we rooted solidly in our values of who we are and what we stand for? And are we clear about those values? And then that becomes a little bit of our starting point. Is that accurate?
Yeah, right. We need to be aware of who we are, what do we stand for, and it will create some kind of cultural identity. And I believe that we can base it on our history. We have amazing role models who were fighting for the freedom in our country, and these are those who represent some kind of leadership attributes that we should follow and take a wisdom from. So this is very important to work with positive role models, to see that change is possible, that it is possible to make change in the right way. And that's why I am so much interested in ethical leadership, because I believe that leadership is something what must be based on moral values. So the ethics is the heart of leadership.
Well, and I love how you're thinking that if this is rooted in our heroes, rooted in the values and those stories, that everyone collectively, or I should say probably a great majority of these individuals, valued these heroes, resonated with these heroes. And if we're taking some of what we're in a contemporary way saying, this is who we are, and taking from them, I think it's just beautiful, because it's hard to argue with that.
You're right. It's hard to argue with that, but it is not easy to apply it, to put it into action in contemporary society, because you have so many pressures, you have so many information. And when you consider it like people, if they want to believe to something, they will find support for their arguments on the internet. And it's so dangerous. Because if they are lacking a certain level of critical thinking, they can believe it. They are strongly persuaded that it's right. And they have their own wisdom then, and it's dangerous. This is why is it so important to somehow connect this leadership development also with an education system in the country. And I can see that we have many smart, intelligent, and highly motivated teachers, but the system is not still as good as it should be, is not as supportive as it should be for development of such life skills for children as, for example, self-awareness. It's important to educate people how important role values play in their lives, that values are creating the core of our identity and integrity. And if people don't know this, and if you, for example, have a leadership training and you start to talk about these topics, I'm receiving many times feedback from these managers that, why is not something like this being taught at primary schools or elementary schools? That this is something what must be developed not only at this level of adults, but also learn children about the importance of being aware. What do I stand for? Why I believe this? Is it a valid information connected with the critical thinking skills and also some kind of mental agility, emotional agility to learn how to cope with difficulties? And especially in this kind of society in which we live, that we are facing many challenges. And people, when they feel that they are tired, many people are looking for shortcuts. And this is that room for I would not say for leaders, but for tyrants who can offer very easy solutions, but of course that are not leading to the desired destination as a society. And we are going back. And this is something what we need to stop and change it. And this change is quite painful, but do it in such a way that it will be rooted, especially in these moral values, that we will be able to inspire from those role models, from the historical role models, and try to apply this wisdom into everyday actions. And immediately, as Aristotle said many years ago, that we become what we repeatedly do, not what we repeatedly say.
Yes.
And many people, they say something, but they are not congruent in their actions. What is the most important part of leadership? Being congruent, because congruence is something what makes people trustworthy, and this makes them authentic, and it means that people would love to follow them.
Yes, well, and that trust is, I think in any human relationship, it's the glue that if I trust you as an individual, then I will more likely work above and beyond, or I will more likely be activated willingly if I have trust in that relationship or trust in that leader. It's so interesting. I mean, I have incredible respect. Your passion shines through. You have a very clear vision of what's needed. Well, as you're speaking with managers and leaders in the communities, does your message resonate with them? Do they see that? Do they agree? And so I think that's part one of the question. But then part two is, do they follow through with that behavior as well? And I'm sure, like anywhere in the world, it's a little bit of a all over the place as to those who do and those who don't.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. There are amazing role models who can serve as an example, really walking the talk from the leadership position. And you can see it as a system of falling good that from above. And people can see that what is being preached is being demonstrated by everyday actions. So it's really the way how to create healthy organization culture that enhances culture of psychological safety, and people can grow in such an environment because they are not afraid, they don't feel fear, and they can use their potential. But of course, there are also companies in which, for example, these leaders at very high positions ask you to coach their manager, and you will realize, okay, but this manager is absolutely okay. But the leader is having a problem. And how to approach this kind of situation, how to make this pushback to such a high position. And this is exactly that moment in which I realized, okay, so I know that this person is not a leader. Because the main distinguishing factor for me, who is a manager and who is a leader, is that when I meet a leader, the real leader, I feel that I can tell him or tell her what I think. That they create a psychologically safe environment in which you feel that they are interested in your feedback, constructive feedback, that you will be not afraid. And they appreciate that you are not afraid to make this kind of pushback.
Yes.
Because they can learn from it and they can grow. So this is very rare, but it happened to me several times. And I'm still cooperating with these leaders, and they are creating certain community. They are trying to organize also very meaningful conferences here in Slovakia. So I'm not saying that everything is bad. No, I'm just saying that we're in progress, that we need to connect. And what would help, and I feel that it is really helping, is to network also with people from abroad and learn. Still, we need to learn a lot and bring this knowledge back. The challenge that we are facing now is that a young generation of smart people is leaving Slovakia. And they are leaving because they don't see a perspective to stay here because of the state representatives that we have here. They can see what kind of consolidation packages we have to somehow recover our economy. But these packages are very tough. And maybe it will happen that many big companies will decide to leave Slovakia. So it is not very motivation for young people to stay here. But even though I say, okay, go away, go and learn, but come back, bring this wisdom and try to change it, try to be part of this change. I strongly believe that we were born in some specific place for some reason.
Wow.
I believe it, okay? I have opportunity to live in the US, in Belgium, but whenever I was coming back to Sliač, a beautiful little spa town in central Slovakia, my heart was like melting. I really felt that this is the place where I belong. And from this place, I'm really so grateful that I can do things in such a way that I can think globally, but act locally. And I think that this is the way how we can make change happen in such transformational way and make people believe that this is the way that, we need to make also to those state representatives some kind of pushback. I know that it's not easy because they are not listening to us ordinary people, but finding the way and not giving it up.
And I think that gets into just your phrasing there of not giving it up. That's in your bio. I used the word resilience a couple times, and you've woven in, right? You've woven in some really wonderful, strong ingredients, I think. So from a moral values standpoint to our leaders creating a space that's psychologically safe, to are we going to maintain resilience in the face of some of these challenges as we transition, because it's in that space of transition. And the system isn't yet designed to elevate some of the ideal players. And that's happening all over the world. That's happening all over the world. Some of the kind of movements in different parts of the world. It's really, really fascinating right now. That's for sure. So tell me more about what you're hearing from average leaders and managers and organizations. Is it also a shift for them? I imagine it is, to construct the activity of leading others in a different way, from more of the authoritarian command and control, I'm the boss, to more of a, I'm going to create a place where there's psychological safety, where people have voice. I might not always agree or act upon that advice or that feedback, but I do value to and want people to feel like they can share what they're thinking. That's a shift. You're seeing that shift over and over, I imagine.
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. And this is what fascinates me in companies, that there are people at the top of the organizations that believe that, okay, I have been manager for many years, but I feel that I am struggling something important, some kind of important ingredient that is missing here. And that should enable me to better deal with people, to better understand people, and to make people full. And it's really interesting to look at this also from the perspective of university education. We have study programs for management, for business, but we don't have accredited study programs in leadership studies. When I was in the US as a visiting scholar at Jepson School of Leadership Studies, it was an amazing experience for me because I saw that you can study their study program in leadership. You have there subjects such as critical thinking, and many, many other very interesting things that you can learn. And be aware that they are a very important part for development of leaders' way of thinking. And I believe that if we want to help to form good leaders, we need to start from the self-leadership first. These people need to understand, first of all, who they are, what do they stand for, whether they really understand also the values of their companies, whether they can see match of these values, whether they can accept the way that they will be congruent with these values, because whatever they will say, people will be watching them.
Yes.
And there's a lot of pressure on these people. So they need to be very open in a communication. They need to work on themselves first, to be able to lead themselves first, and to understand that the best way how to influence people is their example, being a role model for them and walking their talk. And even though if they make some mistakes, admit it and say, okay, let's see, we have tried this. I apologize. I really made mistake. And this is the way how they will enable creation of psychological safety. If they ask people to share their ideas, the leader should be the first one who should share that, for example, something went wrong and I accept it. It's my responsibility. I will learn from it. And I saying it here that we are living such a period in which the periodicity of that change is extremely, the only certainty that we have is that we know that tomorrow will be different in something.
Yes.
So that's why we need to create that safety and help and enable people understand that the only way how we can survive is to experiment, not be afraid to bring new ideas, to innovate. And this is the way how we can move forward. And this leads to innovation.
But I love that phrasing of experimentation because, yes, when we're navigating some of these complex adaptive challenges, for instance, the youth leaving the country, what do we do to inspire, motivate, encourage those individuals to maybe go away, but also to come home so that they can help in that transition, so they can help facilitate that change? But you're exactly right. Even if we do establish people solidly in those values, the system will test them. And when the system tests them, how they respond makes a big difference. And I think humans have struggled with this since the beginning of time. I really do. It's a strong individual. And to your point, the first female president, was that her title, president?
President, right. This is the problem because there are so many people who you would like to see also to become a politician, but that safety is not there, that you will enter this area of public life. And what about, you are immediately thinking about, what about my family,
Yep.
I'm really passionate about leadership topic. I know that many people who were situational leaders, they took their responsibility and to make change, and they were creators of that change. For example, Martin Luther King in your country or Ludovic Tur in my country, okay? And they devoted their life to this change. They didn't know what will happen. So it's extreme responsibility.
Yes.
And I believe that the topic of leadership is connected also with the topic of moral responsibility. And when I am having a trainings, for example, in leadership, I do all my best to make these leaders think in context of moral imagination. Patricia Verheyen, she is an author of this concept from University of Virginia, and I'm so much inspired by her work and also by work of Joanne Shula, ethical leadership, and also Professor Ed Freeman, stakeholder theory concept. So I just try to experiment with these concepts and to make people think, what would happen if I will solve these dilemmatic situations in this way or in this way? I believe that it is to having some case studies, and they are bringing their case studies to our trainings, real life case studies. And This is the best way how to train this moral imagination. But it is still some kind of meso level, and we need to do something similar at macro level. When I was a finalist in that Learning and Development Awards, I received questions from committee. And they asked me, Zuzana, would you take responsibility and would you go to train politicians, Slovak politicians, in ethical leadership? And I said, yes, I would love. But nobody asks me. They would never ask you to do something like this. They don't want to discuss these topics. They have their own rules. And you know that they are saying something, but doing something different. And this congruence is the biggest enemy of leadership.
Yes. How do we decrease that gap, increase the congruence, to use your phrase? There's an incredible book that I want listeners to be aware of. I want you to be aware of. Have you ever heard of the book Corruptible by Brian Klaas?
No.
Okay. Fascinating. I listened to it and he reads the book to you. So I really, really enjoyed it, but it's called Corruptible. And he really explores when it comes to the topic of leadership. Is it that power corrupts? Is it that the system corrupts? Or is it that individuals who seek power like a moth to a flame, that power, those people are attracted to it, that some of the challenging people are attracted to that position of authority? And it's a fascinating listen because he's a political scientist and he takes you on this tour of the world and what's happened in the world. But what, to your point, I mean, there's individuals, I think something we're talking about here is that leadership oftentimes is presented as chocolate bars, tulips and daisies, and warm fuzzies. And everyone be a leader. There's danger, there's loss, there's fear. And back to Martin Luther King, at least in our country, he was assassinated, or Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Mandela was jailed, or Gandhi was assassinated. And it's dangerous. It's not easy. And I think at times we pretend or hold it up as this. Ron Heifetz once at the Kennedy School, I was at this program called The Art and Practice of Leadership Development. And it was one of the most transformational learning experiences. Zuzana, go. If you can get to that learning experience. I just had Tim O'Brien, who helps coordinate that program now, on the podcast. But most powerful learning experience I've ever been a part of. But he made a statement. He said, look, I'm not going to pretend that leadership is safe. He wasn't really a big fan of creating a safe space, so to speak, because he thought that was doing a disservice to his students, that there is risk, there is danger. And so I have incredible respect for you in the sense that you have a very clear vision of how you think, whether it's in the primary and secondary schools or whether it's in the colleges or whether we have programs to help us train leaders, positional leaders in the government. I'm going to be meeting today on the podcast with Ira Chalef, who spent years working to prepare our political officials to do the work and help them better understand what it means to be a leader. Now, did they always act on that? No. That's a struggle. That's a challenge. But that's the work that he was engaged in and that he was passionate about. And I just have so much respect for your work, what you're doing, the context you're in.
Thank you very much. There are so many people who are doing really a great job here in Slovakia. And I believe that we need to connect and create that kind of, not movement, but the community.
Yes.
That will emphasize that it's not just like that how we lead people, that we need to have the right set of values and have courage, right? That it's something what really matters, that it's not sometimes safe, but it's good things to do.
Yes.
The right things to do.
Yes. As we begin to wind down our time today, can you share with listeners maybe what you've been listening to or reading, or maybe something you've been streaming? What's something that's caught your attention in recent times? It can have something to do with what we've just discussed. It might have anything to do with what we've just discussed. What's caught your attention in recent times?
When we just started to have this conversation, you asked me what else I would like to add to this conversation, and I mentioned my children. And we are just experiencing a beautiful period in our life that my children are really giving me feedback, and they want to share with me their days. It's especially during the evening time. And I appreciate it so much. Sometimes, of course, I'm tired and I don't want to listen and I'm just throwing a pillow on them. But most of the days, I really enjoy having this conversation with them. So the biggest source of wisdom are my children, because we experiment at home with this resilience concept, with values things that I always emphasize them, that they will meet different people in their life, that some of those people will be good, some of those people will not be in such position they will be able to understand what's the best possible choice to make in the situation. And I'm trying to prepare them for such situations to make their own mind, to be able to decide based on what they believe is right. And the biggest source of wisdom in this for me in my life were my parents. I have amazing parents They were learning me from early childhood that it's important to be good to people, to do good. And also when I was a visiting scholar at Jepson School of Leadership Studies, University of Richmond, Joanne Shula, she was the lady that introduced me to the concept of ethical leadership. And it was the very first moment in 2001 when she explained that this, what I have from my family, is somehow present also in this scientific concept, and that it can be implemented into not only family life, but also to organizational life, but also to society life. And from this very first moment I met her in 2002, I knew what I would love to do in my life. And what is very eye-opening for me is that since this period, until I had children, I only was focusing on academic world and also on a business world. But when my children were born, I started to use this concept also in the way how I bring them up. And I realized that this is amazing experience for me, that they are being my partners, my children. They are giving me very interesting ideas, and I can say that I'm really learning from them.
Well, you couldn't have said it better. We have a son that's 16 and we have twin girls that are 14. Right before our son was born, my wife said something to me. She said, I just hope you really stay present through this experience of parenthood. And I really took that comment to heart. And so my son was born, and for some reason, I opened up my laptop the day he was born and I wrote a sentence. And then the second day I wrote a sentence. And this morning, the first task I did for each of the three children was I wrote a sentence. And it's just something they said, something that happened in their day. Maybe it was the first day they ever walked. But my sentence for my son recently, and it's happened on 5 or 6 occasions in recent months, is you're challenging me to be better, because I don't have the skill right now to always navigate some of the situations the way I want to. But he is holding up a mirror and he's helping me. If I look at it through that lens, he's helping me get better and helping me really get in touch with even elements that I need to work on. And oof, wow. It is, to your point, it's such a wonderful learning experience, parenthood, if we choose it to make it that, right?
Right, exactly. And the choice is something very important in our life. What we choose to pay attention to. And exactly what you mentioned, also your experience with your children, isn't it leadership? So all those things that you mentioned in relationship with your children are so important also in relationship with people in any organization or at society level, to listen to actively, to be present, to be there, that people will feel that you care. Because many people will forget about what you will tell them, some smart things, smart ideas, but they will never forget how you make them feel.
Yes. And that's where we will end today. That is beautifully said. Zuzana, thank you so much for checking in. And thank you for the good work that you're doing in the world. It's incredible. And for listeners, if they want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Scott, thank you very much for having me here in this podcast. Furnace is something what I love. It's Aristotle's idea, right? Living and what you are preaching. If any of your audience would like to connect with me, LinkedIn is probably the best way. So we can connect via LinkedIn, and it will be my pleasure to respond to messages. Feel free.
I will put that in the show notes. And you know what? I hope that our paths cross in about a year in Prague for the International Leadership Association conference. I hope I can meet you in 3 dimensions now. We've met in 2 dimensions digitally, but I look forward to that. Take care. Thank you so much, Zuzana. Be well and take care.
Perhaps one of the greatest complex adaptive challenges that we as leadership scholars and educators, practitioners face is, how do we use our knowledge to help better prepare people to serve in these very, very complex roles with a number of competing commitments? How do we help them better do that work? And that in and of itself is a complex adaptive challenge, because there's a lot happening out there, and I'm not always sure that it's actually having the intended results. So here you have someone, Zuzana, who is working it, and she is doing her best to help influence in her community, in her country, a way of being that, in her mind, and I would agree, is a good way to be. Are we ethical? Are we curious? Are we experimental? Are we individuals who are role models, heroes? And she is in her country doing that work. I hope you loved that conversation. I hope you see yourself in her story. You are in a country as well, although it might be a college or an organization, a nonprofit, an NGO. And how are you facilitating change and preparing others to lead in your context? As always, thank you so much. Take care. Be well. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.